All right, it's time to make some hot muffins. And we're not baking today, we're making neon signs. Here are the layers in Illustrator: the ring, the word muffins, and the word hot. And I have this connector layer. Letters on neon signs are connected. I'm going to use a regular brush tool, and with the connector layer selected, just going to draw in some connectors. Now that the connectors are created, let's pop over to After Effects and get started making this a neon sign. It's time to animate. Import the Illustrator file, File, Import, File. Select the Illustrator file, which is neonmuffins.ai. Before you import, make sure it says Import as Composition, Retain Layer Sizes, and then you can click Import. The file imported with its own composition. I'm going to double click to open it up. Click. If you don't see anything, that's okay. Just toggle the display of the alpha grid, and now we can see everything. The artwork might look a little blurry, and that's because we have to rasterize every layer. And everything now will be crisp, not only out here, but later on when we rasterize the composition, it also will be crisp. And you'll see that in a few minutes from now. I'm first going to apply a bevel. I'm going to select Bevel Alpha. Anything that's alpha can be beveled. I'm going to apply that to the hot word right here. If I zoom in, going to increase the thickness of that bevel so it's easier to see. Let me toggle that on and off. So that's what the Bevel Alpha is doing. I want to keep the bevel uniformed on the other objects. I'm going to copy the Bevel Alpha, copy. I'm going to select all three of the remaining pieces of art on these layers and press Command V for paste, and that same Bevel Alpha gets pasted on each one of these layers, bringing those values over. You can still adjust the values on a particular layer if you want. The next step is to add some color. Let's use tint. Going to drag tint to the ring. I'm going to map black to yellow. Just my artistic choice. You could choose your own colors. Then I'm going to take tint and drag it to the muffins layer. And for the muffins layer, I think these are blue muffins. Maybe these are special blueberry muffins. And hot, going to drag tint to that layer. And of course, hot would be red. A little cliched, I know, but visually makes sense. Hot muffins. These connectors are now a little too prominent. I'm also going to drag a tint to them. And instead of picking a color, I'll just pick a grayscale value to push them back a little bit. Let me turn on the black background again. So that's what we created. We instantly got our artwork puffed up. If you didn't want your neon to be so edgy, like here, you can apply a fast box blur. Let me show you what that will do. I'm not going to be using it for this demo, just showing you what it can do. Fast box blur. Let me put it on this ring layer. I'll increase the blur radius and watch right here. Let me zoom in even closer. So we could just soften out everything. Then, if I didn't want the edges to be soft like that, I was just interested in blurring the inside, this is what I would do. And now I'm going to undo all this, so don't follow me on this one. Well, we got this ring. And this ring, if I remove the tint, the fastbox blur, it's just this outline like this. In a different lesson, we learned about using track mats. And this ring, which is the color one, will have ring 2 as its track mat. See what that did? stop that blurriness from leaking off to the left and right side. If I undo that, just no track matte, blurs way out, so everything looks a little out of focus, which is a cool effect, but maybe not for a neon sign. When you use the track matte, it's sharper again, and we got rid of that hard edge here. As I mentioned, I'm not going to be using this, so let me just throw out that and set my track matte to none and remove fast box blur. But now you can see how you can play with layers and using track mattes to blur things out and then make sharper edges around those blurs by reusing a layers piece of art. Back to the main project. All right, actually this is done for now. I need a new composition to put this in and to start the glowing. Composition, new composition. Let's call this my final scene. All the other settings are okay. 1920 by 1080 HD TV. It's 15 seconds and clicking OK. Going to the project window, dragging in the neon muffin. And when I drag it in, it's going to be small. Oh no, we want bigger muffins than that. Let me scale up this piece of artwork. Click in the corner and just hold down the shift key and drag it bigger. And now we'll encounter those nasty jaggy edges. But that's cool, since we're using Illustrator piece of art and we rasterized all those layers within the neon muffins composition. All I have to do is click rasterization with this neon muffins on the outside of the composition in the final scene, and look what happens. Nice and crisp again. And that's the advantage of using Illustrator art, vector art, and rasterization of layers. So the glow, no big surprise, there's an effect called glow. Now I'm going to be using Take 5. Pick Stylize Glow and drag that to the neon muffins layer. The values that we're interested in are the threshold, radius, and intensity. Threshold. At low thresholds, everything will become this bright spot. At high thresholds, nothing will be bright. So somewhere a little further down, maybe I'll set that to a hard 68, right there, for threshold. Radius. How big is that glow radius around the piece of art? I think that's a good glow radius. And we're going to be animating this glow radius like this in a moment. That's how we're going to create the animation. Intensity. At high levels, this is cool, like here and here and here. We're in like a hot muffins cafe / discotheque. Maybe you want to go this bright with the intensity. It's a little too intense for me. I'm going to drag that down. It started out around 1. I'm going to leave it at 1.5. All right, time to get this animated. And the first way I'm going to animate it is using glow radius, and later on I'm going to also add opacity for animation. Option click on glow radius. If you see this message, just ignore it for now. Don't worry. Everything will be okay in a moment. You type in wiggle. Make sure you remove everything that was here to begin with, and we're going to be using wiggle. Wiggle takes 2 values. How many times per second to do something, and how big will that change be? Let's try the number 30. So do something 100 times a second and change this radius by a random number of 30. Let's take a look. Well, we got something going, a little too intense for those muffin seekers, especially early in the morning. I'm going to change this first value. I don't want it to be 100 times a second. I want it to be soft. You know, getting my day going. I don't need a bright neon sign flashing that much. I think that's fine. And the blues are flashing. Let me zoom into that here. It's just harder to see because our eyes are so focused in on the yellow and the red. So we can either change the color of the muffin blue or just leave it the way it is. We'll fix not seeing it glow in a second also by animating the opacity. I'm going to duplicate this whole neon muffin layer. Command D or Control D. Go into the bottom one. And I'm just going to rename this muffin layer so it's not confusing. This could be our gray muffin layer. What I mean by gray, let me turn off right here, this top layer. I'm going to remove the glow from this bottom layer, so it's nothing, and I'm going to apply a tint to this whole layer. And this is so I can make this grayscale, like that. So when our muffin sign dims out, it might dim out to this grayscale version of this image. If I want it to be flat grayscale, I can just choose gray for both of these. Let me copy this code. So gray on gray. Now it's a flat muffin sign, but I didn't want it to be flat. I didn't mind some of the dimension happening there. Let me just gray out the black swatch right here. Okay, let me turn on the top muffin layer again. Click. And so my goal is to have it dim a little bit towards nothingness. And then maybe I'll make it a different color instead of gray. Just want to see gray, make sure the effect is working. Going to the top layer, opening up transparency, which is opacity, T key. Option or Alt click on the stopwatch to access the transformations. Remove all this, and type in wiggle. The wiggle, it could be 5 times a second, but it's not going to be very intense. I just want something for opacity to fade down just a little bit, maybe 20% by 20%. So opacity will range from 80 to 100%. Click off and let's take a look. If I make this number bigger, it could be easier to see. And maybe I do have to make it bigger. Let's say 60. So as you stare into this, you can kind of see it graying out occasionally. There's a grayed out moment, and that's because the opacity of this color is being removed to show through the grayscale of the background. When you turn off a neon sign, it's kind of gray. But if you want to reinforce the background with a different color, maybe everything doesn't go to gray, maybe instead it goes to a color, let me just change the color of the tint. Maybe it all goes to red. So that's going to reinforce the word hot, and everything else will be mixed with red. We got it going into this little purple zone here. It's kind of fun. Maybe I can make that a little more intense. It was red on red, like that. And there's our neon sign doing its glowy thing. So play with the background color. I think grayscale is a good choice. You could experiment with colors. What if it was going to white occasionally? Get this little pop. I think grayscale or color is a good way to go. This way we get some purpley muffins. The colors being mixed because the top layer's opacity is dipping down. You can see the numbers of opacity here as it goes through. So it has 100%. Sometimes there it goes down to 58. The lowest it would go is 40. And that's what the second number does. Take the maxed value and randomly subtract somewhere between 0 and 60 from this top value. All right, we're almost done. One more thing to do. Let's add an image into this just to grunge it up. File, import, window. This is going to be real quick. I'm going to take the window and just going to plop it above everything else. The window's small. It's okay. It's a grunge layer. Just going to scale it up. And then making sure you have this icon selected, which is expand or collapse transfer controls, which just means your color mixing modes. I'm going to choose soft light, like this. And also I'm going to change the opacity of that window layer. Just pull it down. This way we get a little bit of an interesting texture going on. Zoom in, you can see the texture happening within the letters. Without it on, with it on. And that's all this top layer does, this little grunge layer. Save the file and share your hot muffins or whatever words you chose in Illustrator.